A balmy autumn evening, the perfect time for a ball. Elegant ladies and gallant gentlemen, and even the emperor himself were ready to waltz. But the grand case soon interrupted by terrible news. Napoleon's army had invaded Russia. This is Peterhof, home to Russia's most beautiful palaces and gardens. Every autumn, a glorious celebration marks the end of the fountain season. Today's event is dedicated to the War of 1812. However, this magnificent ensemble of museums and fountains is more than just a remnant of Peter the Great's 19th century Russia. It also bears the scars of World War II.
Welcome to Peterhof. It is the most visited museum in Russia. Around 4.2 million tourists come to Peterhof every year. Why do people come here? Because Peterhof boasts 150 fountains, 7 palaces and 23 museums. And, of course, the most important highlight of Peterhof is its fountain system.
First fountains, go.
Roger.
Each day at 11 a.m., thousands of tourists gather in the lower gardens of Peterhof to see for themselves the fountains start up. It takes 12 people to open all the valves, and recently it's been accompanied by St. Petersburg's anthem.
Well done.
The idea to build this residence struck Peter the Great during his diplomatic visit to Versailles. However, all of the fountains at Versailles were run with the help of pumps, so they could only operate without human assistance for a very short period of time, and then they had to be pumped. That is why Peter the Great used the Italian gravity system. This means all the Grand Cascade fountains flow on their own.
These fountains spray 1,000 liters of water per second, and in a day they'll use almost 30 million liters. That's enough to fill 12 Olympic-sized swimming pools, and to date, the fountains have never run dry.
Peter loved water very much. This feature was his brainchild, and he wanted to put it into life and see what it would look like, and he did. He could not wait until the official opening of the entire system, and he did a test run well before construction was complete.
Peterhof means Peter's Court in German, and in the early 18th century, the emperor enlisted Europe's best architects, sculptors, gardeners and engineers, like Francesco Rastrelli, Nicola Michetti and Jean-Baptiste Leblond, all hired to help the emperor to realize his grand ideas. Even after Peter died, construction never stopped, as each successive ruler contributed to its present appearance. Its huge grounds can easily fit more than 500 football fields. Sofia Vachul is researching the imperial residence's unique fountain system. To finish her 10-year-long project, she still has to conduct a number of interviews.
The facade of the fountains is well known, but as for the pipe system, very few are aware of it. So I would like to make people familiar with it.
Nina Yershova has been in charge of preserving the fountain system for 35 years. She made up her mind to work here when she first saw the Grand Cascade at the age of 5. Grottos beneath the fountains are lit by daylight and still look as they did in Peter the Great's time. Back then, only people who were thin and short enough would be able to work here, so they could climb into a pipe and fix anything that broke down. Today's engineers solve such problems with the help of technology.
Well, we've got enough water today, so we can stand while working. We have no problems today. I saw a small leak, but you can look at it closely and decide what to do about it.
The water comes through the spout there. Everything's fine.
The Grand Cascade's central feature is the gilded Samson fountain. The water jet from the lion's mouth shoots 21 meters up into the sky. The Samson fountain commemorates Russia's victory over Sweden in the decisive Battle of Poltava, leading to victory in the Great Northern War. Since then, the image of Samson has not only symbolized Peter the Great and the Russian army, but also the victory in World War II.
In September 1941, the Germans began their 900-day siege of Leningrad. The authorities took whatever valuables they could from the palace to St. Isaac's Cathedral. These figures on the cascade were buried in the park, but the Samson weighs 3.5 tons. It was simply too heavy to move. When German soldiers took pictures here in 1943, the Samson was still present. When our troops liberated Peterhof, the Samson was gone.
When Peterhof was seized by the Nazis, it was almost completely demolished. The occupying forces took away the major bronze statues and lead bas-reliefs of the Grand Cascade. Almost 10,000 of the park's trees were cut down. Ditches and trenches replaced once magnificent palaces. After the war, when restoring the gardens and parks, many were killed by unexploded landmines. The Lavrentievs, who had returned to the city, were invited to reconstruct the fountain system. Before the revolution of 1917, the head of the family worked as a fountain maker for Emperor Nicholas II. His son, Pavel Lavrentiev, followed in his father's footsteps.
It was 1946, August as far as I remember, the opening of the first construction stage. There were only 2 Italian fountains, as well as terraced fountains. Samson was not there, only his pedestal.
Father and son had to work together all through the night. Only 2 hours before the grand opening in 1947 were the water jets for the pedestal of the Grand Cascade finally installed. The Lavrentievs were also present during the excavation of numerous sculptures.
In 1941, our guys were quick enough to bury all the sculptures from the Chess Mountain Cascade and the Gold Hill Cascade. The Germans never guessed they had done it. No wonder, it was the Russians who buried them, right where they removed them, next to the cascade. And of course, if the Germans had guessed about it, they would have taken all those sculptures with them.
As for Samson, he was never found. Some believe that the Germans took him away to be melted down for bronze. And so sculptor Vasily Simonov made a new one.
There had been a war and a blockade. More than 1 million people had died from starvation. And the beautiful, shiny Samson was delivered by tractor. People were crying and kneeling down. The police had stopped traffic. It was delivered here to open the 47th fountain season. For all Russians, the Samson fountain is the main fountain of Russia. It's not only a symbol of Peter's victory in Poltava, but also of our whole heroic history.
Vilya Mangulov is the oldest staff member at Peterhof. He knows the history of every sculpture in the park in detail, and only after his thorough examination may a restored statue return to Peterhof.
We shouldn't deviate from the anatomy.
It follows the picture that you sent us. We simply copied the way in which her fingers are bent.
Shall we press down the finger a little bit?
No, it's pressed down already. Is it as thick as the one in the picture?
Well, of course it can be improved.
Today, the biggest problem for Peterhof's sculptures is vandalism. Some tourists break fingers off the statues, but unbeknownst to them, they're only taking home replicas. Many of the originals have long been kept hidden away in storage.
Despite all our efforts, marble sculptures have always been damaged, both now and in the times of Peter the Great. Here, incidentally, is one of Peterhof's best sculptures. It's Andromeda. Greek mythology has it that she was the daughter of an Ethiopian king who was due to be sacrificed to a sea monster so it would stop ravaging her kingdom. It was the ancient hero Perseus who defeated the sea monster and won over the beautiful Andromeda. The right hand was reconstructed after the war. However, you can see that this reconstructed hand doesn't have all 5 fingers.
This unusual sculpture is near Montplaisir, Peter the Great's favorite palace and the only building here to survive World War II intact. When approaching the Neptune fountain, Peter the Great used to say that sea air was the best medicine.
This is the first bronze statue of Russia. Before that, there were no secular statues in Russia at all. All the sculptures were religious and were made of either wood or stone. Peter wanted to have his own Neptune, but at that time, all the bronze was, of course, used to make cannons. So they took a bronze trophy cannon and cast this first Neptune. People always ask why it has such shiny feet. This is because tourists rub them for luck.
And how many times?
Oh, the more the better.
We've spent a lot of time thinking what to do for the fountain season's closing ceremony. We realized it wasn't just any old event, but the 200th anniversary of the victory in the 1812 war. The main theme of this performance is a ball interrupted by the war. Dances like these were common in this palace, and we're commemorating the 200th anniversary of Borodino this year.
All of Peterhof's staff members, some 2,000 of them, are busy making final preparations for the fountain season's closing ceremony. Details of the performance are a closely guarded secret, even from those who work at the historic Peterhof every day. For a few days in Peterhof's Alexandria Park, time goes back to the era of Cardinal Richelieu. The park transforms into La Rochelle, complete with a fortress, camp guards, guns and war horses. The main actors are musketeers, performing daring feats like chasing carriages. In the old days, various people were brought to Peterhof from France, and today the stunts are still staged by the French. A new movie based on one of Alexandre Dumas' novels is being shot here.
Well, the park is simply wonderful. That's why we're shooting here. Can you see the beautiful trees around you? It looks like vintage France. Wonderful oaks, which are 200 years old, if not older.
Unlike the grand palaces and geometrical designs elsewhere in Peterhof, the Alexandria landscape is mostly natural. This romantic park was created in the 19th century, when Nicholas I was emperor. It was named after his wife, Alexandra. At the beginning of the 20th century, it was a favorite spot for Nicholas II, the last emperor of the Romanov dynasty, whose children were raised here.
Well, Oak, let's see how you're doing.
These centuries-old trees are under the strict control of their curator, Olga Yemelyanova. Only 200 of the oaks that saw Peter the Great and his successors remain. They're regularly inspected by specialists in wood diseases, and part of the process involves detailed imaging technology.
The results are good. The wood that was healthy remain healthy. Well, it's getting a bit drier and there is some dead wood in the middle. But all in all, its condition remained the same. It's a good oak and it feels good.
To draw the visitors' eyes, the park benefits from a range of natural lighting effects, all creating a beautifully glistening effect in the water, with rays of light playing through regular rows of trees.
Now we are walking along another avenue of the lower gardens. It is called Marley Alley because it leads to the Marley Palace. There you can see the palace. 3 other avenues of the lower gardens lead to the Marley Palace. Such style of garden is called French formal garden. French gardens have straight avenues and the trees are trimmed to give them regular geometric forms.
Peter the Great once flew into a rage when he saw a French architect he'd invited to Peterhof cutting down trees. The Tsar was quick to beat his guest Jean-Baptiste Leblond with a stick, but he was later embarrassed to discover that Leblond was in fact simply trimming the trees. He was so eager to impress foreign visitors with a new image of Russia that he gladly took on the new European trend for trimming trees.
Guys, we need to make a trapezoid by cutting off more from the top and a little bit less at the bottom. That's how we'll be able to achieve the trapezoid shape.
Interestingly, the French once believed that only men could become gardeners. They thought that as a mother it was difficult for a woman to cut a living thing. But here in the gardens of Peterhof, male gardeners are the exception rather than the rule. Olga Yemeljanova's job is to preserve the garden's historic appearance, so they look as they did under the emperors. The plant collection includes lindens, oaks and ash trees, and remains true to Peter's records. After all, the emperor took personal care of the assortment of trees growing in these gardens.
This should be a good linden.
Everything I deal with goes well.
Everything grows well. Keep it in line, please.
Peterhof is often compared to Versailles, but this grand Russian residence is on the shore of the Gulf of Finland. The unique water supply system has prompted Sofia to develop a new tourist walk through the springs and reservoirs.
I will continue with this research. I will try to learn as much as possible, and if my album is published and people are interested in this, then this place has huge potential. And I think that this system will be no less interesting than the central feature of Peterhof. If we develop a tourist route here, it is going to be quite long. It will be engaging for those who love active recreation. They could get here by bicycle.
While exploring the surrounding area, Peter discovered the Robchenskie mineral springs. The special feature of Peterhof's fountains is that they work without pumps. The height difference in the terrain makes the water run downhill. The flow begins 22 kilometers from the Grand Palace, and there's a whole network of natural streams flowing into a canal, which then feeds 18 storage ponds. Through gateways, the water flow is piped directly to the fountains. The entire pipeline covers a length of 40 kilometers. Hydraulic engineer Vasily Tovolkov realized Peter's ideas, and the emperor himself dug out the last shovel of earth from the new canal. In 1721, the fountains began to flow. In some places, the pipes installed in the days of Peter the Great have been preserved. However, the gravity fountains of Peterhof are at risk. Cottage settlements are being built near the storage ponds, and artesian wells are being dug. In the future, this may lead to both pollution and water shortages.
If we do not take any measures in the nearest future, namely develop a strategy to protect the entire system, it may be too late. As a result, we may end up using pump fountains. This is highly undesirable, as the fountains will be working only a few hours a day if that happens.
Peter wanted to impress the garden's visitors, not just with fountains, but with a variety of entertainments and wonders, such as trimming trees in the shape of fairy tale characters. Birds brought in from overseas were strolling along the avenues, and a special selection of trick fountains.
Here we have Peterhof's trick fountains. All of them were designed to take visitors by surprise so that they would end up under a jet of water quite unexpectedly. Some start when you sit on a bench, for instance. Back in the days of Peter the Great, people used to wear lots of makeup, wore big wigs and heavy dresses, powdered their faces, and added color to their eyebrows. But legend has it that when they came under these jets of water, all their makeup was gone within seconds. And then Peter would tell them, "Finally, when your makeup is off, I can see your true faces."
Beauty is inseparable from function. That's the motto here at the Peterhof Gardens, and all the buildings serve both aesthetic and economic purposes. Peter the Great's garden is an example of this. The emperor personally ordered Dutch fruit and vegetable seeds, which were escorted to Russia as valuable cargo.
This garden has the very plants that Peter the Great first brought to Russia in 1711. All of them grow here today. This is lettuce, radish, the famous and most unusual vegetable called artichoke, and, of course, potatoes. Legend has it that Peter the Great planted the first 2 sacks of potatoes with his own hands.
Vegetables became so popular that the white flowers from potato plants were the most fashionable in ladies' hair decoration for quite some time. Today, the keeper of the historical garden, Yelena Kuzmenko, sets about harvesting fruit and vegetables. According to Dutch tradition, she uses them to decorate the vases in Peterhof's lower gardens. Each year, the Fountain Festival is dedicated to a particular era. In 2012, the show takes the audience back to the heroic battles of 1812, reminding everyone of the fact that 200 years ago, Moscow burned down almost completely, and shows the victory over Napoleon at the Battle of Borodino. For the first time, a multimedia laser show brings the walls of the Grand Palace to life. Palatial scenery becomes a virtual display. The closing of the season is still truly on an imperial scale. The day after the spectacle, Sophia met with the fountain system's chief specialist. Her study of Peterhof is nearing completion.
Could you tell me, how do the newly built cottages impact the water supply system?
Well, so far it hasn't had any harmful impact, as not a single cottage settlement has been commissioned yet. But of course there are concerns that it may lead to some kind of environmental disaster.
What do you think is the most difficult part of operating the water supply system in terms of technology?
Well, servicing the fountains is quite easy. It's a work of genius, and everything of genius is simple.
Making Dutch vases always coincides with the Fountain Festival, and I usually have mixed feelings. It's joy and sadness. Joy from the fact that we've grown fine crops that will decorate the garden, and the guests will enjoy them. And sadness because the season is over and winter is knocking on the door.
When the fountain season is over, life changes. We say here that life is dull without Peterhof.
Without working fountains, Peterhof feels different. And for the main guardian of the fountain system, Nina Yershova, and all those who work with her, autumn is a reminder that time also flows by, just like water.